It was a quiet evening in the suburbs, the kind of evening where the streets were empty and the air felt heavy with calm. Streetlights cast long shadows, and the occasional car passed by, breaking the silence. Officer Daniel Hayes was on his usual patrol, his cruiser gliding slowly through the streets. He was a young officer, new to this neighborhood, but determined to make a good impression. He knew the area, knew its reputation for being peaceful, and yet he remained alert, eyes constantly scanning for anything unusual. That evening, Daniel noticed a car driving a little erratically. It wasn't speeding, but it moved in a way that made him uneasy. He radioed in, asking for a quick check on the license plate, but received no immediate response. Trusting his instincts, he decided to follow the vehicle at a safe distance. The driver seemed to be heading towards a quiet street, away from the main road, and Daniel felt a knot in his stomach. Something didn't feel right, even though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. The driver, a man in his mid-40s, looked calm on the outside, but inside he was irritated. He was a highly respected FBI director, known for his work in federal investigations and law enforcement leadership. Tonight he was off duty, heading to a private meeting in the city. He had chosen this route because it was less crowded, and he wanted a quiet drive to clear his mind. He didn't expect anyone to notice him, let alone question his presence. As the car slowed near a stop sign, Daniel turned on his lights, signaling the driver to pull over. The director, caught off guard, glanced in the rearview mirror. He recognized the standard police cruiser lights but assumed it was a routine patrol, nothing more. He pulled over slowly, keeping both hands on the wheel, but the officer approached cautiously, hand resting near his holstered firearm. Daniel called out through the speaker, asking the driver to step out of the vehicle. The director, surprised by the command, raised his hand slightly and asked why. His tone was calm, but firm, as if to show he had nothing to hide. Daniel, following protocol and seeing the slight hesitation in the driver's movements, became more cautious. The situation was tense, a mix of misunderstanding and miscommunication. Bystanders began to notice. A few people walking their dogs slowed down, curious about the flashing lights. Some even took out their phones, capturing the moment, unaware that this was going to become a story that would spread far beyond the quiet suburban street. The director tried to explain his identity, mentioning his work and position, but Daniel couldn't immediately verify it. He had no way of knowing the man in front of him was indeed who he claimed to be. Daniel's heart raced. He had been trained for situations like this, but he had never been in a moment where the person in front of him might be someone so high-ranking, someone whose life and career carried immense weight. His eyes stayed locked on the driver, noticing every slight movement, every expression. The director, equally aware, tried to keep his tone calm, hoping reason would prevail before the situation escalated. The tension thickened as Daniel radioed in again, repeating the license plate and asking for immediate confirmation. There was a pause, a silence that felt longer than it actually was. The director realized that the officer had no way of knowing who he was, and the lack of recognition made him uneasy. He was unarmed, but the thought of being held at gunpoint by someone who didn't know his identity was unsettling. Daniel, meanwhile, struggled with his sense of duty. On one hand, he knew he had to follow protocol, ensure the safety of everyone involved, and treat the situation seriously. On the other hand, there was a strange feeling that something was off, that perhaps he was overreacting. But in that moment, protocol was everything. He couldn't take chances, not with a driver who had hesitated, not with a scenario that could quickly turn dangerous. As the minutes passed, voices from nearby houses could be heard, windows opened, neighbors whispering to each other, watching from a safe distance. A few brave souls stepped closer, trying to see what was happening. The director continued to explain himself, offering identification, mentioning the federal agency, his responsibilities, and the urgency of his meeting. But Daniel remained cautious, asking the driver to remain still, hand visible, and slowly step out of the car. The director complied, stepping out carefully. His movements were deliberate, slow, and meant to show he posed no threat. Daniel kept his weapon trained, ready for any sudden motion. The officer's training kicked in, instincts heightened. The world seemed to slow down for both of them. The quiet suburban street now a stage for an unexpected confrontation. People on the street were whispering, some recording on their phones, capturing every detail. The director felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him, realizing that even someone in his position could be vulnerable. Even in a place he thought was safe, he tried again to speak calmly, explaining his identity. But Daniel remained firm, insisting on following procedure until confirmation could be made. The radio crackled, a voice finally responding with a verification request. Daniel repeated the situation, emphasizing the driver's identity claim. The response came, a brief pause and then acknowledgement that the verification would take a moment. The tension between them remained, both aware that any sudden move could have serious consequences. The director's mind raced. He thought about the absurdity of being treated like an ordinary suspect, of being held at gunpoint. Yet he also understood the officer's position. Protocols were in place for a reason, and Daniel had no way of knowing his identity without proper verification. It was a strange lesson in humility, a moment that reminded him of the unpredictability of life. Daniel felt the weight of responsibility. Every second counted, every movement mattered. He couldn't ignore his training, couldn't assume the man before him was harmless, no matter what identification or explanation was given. His eyes scanned the driver, searching for any hint of deception, any sign that things were not as they seemed. The director's calm demeanor helped, but it wasn't enough to erase the officer's caution. The silence stretched. Both men stood still, eyes locked, surrounded by the suburban calm that now felt surreal. The director's heart beat faster, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Daniel's focus was absolute, every sense heightened. Neither spoke for a moment, both aware that this encounter would be remembered long after the streetlights went out. Then, with careful words, the director offered to show his identification, to prove his authority. He opened his wallet slowly, handing over credentials in a deliberate motion. Daniel took the ID, examining it, verifying the details against the radio information. The tension began to ease slightly, but caution remained. Verification was not instantaneous, and Daniel knew the importance of following procedure, no matter who stood before him. Bystanders continued to watch, some whispering among themselves, others remaining silent, unsure of what to do. The quiet evening had transformed into a moment of high tension, a scene that would later be discussed and analyzed. The director, despite his rank and authority, was in the same vulnerable position as anyone else under the scrutiny of law enforcement. As Daniel processed the information, a call came through confirming the driver's identity. Relief washed over both men, though in different ways. The director exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly, while Daniel lowered his weapon, though he remained vigilant until the final word. The standoff had lasted only a few minutes, but in those minutes the world had felt suspended, every heartbeat amplified. The director thanked the officer, acknowledging the difficult position he had been in. Daniel nodded, recognizing the complexity of the situation, understanding that protocols were sometimes rigid yet necessary. Both men shared a moment of mutual respect, a silent acknowledgement of the human side of law enforcement, where duty and understanding intersect in unexpected ways. As the director drove away, the street returning to its quiet state, he reflected on the encounter. He had been reminded of the fragility of perception, the fine line between authority and vulnerability. For Daniel, it was a lesson in vigilance, humility, and the importance of following procedure, even when faced with extraordinary circumstances. The evening would leave an indelible mark on both, a story of misunderstanding, protocol, and human instincts that no one could have anticipated. The next day, the story of the unusual encounter spread quickly. People who had seen the incident shared their videos and posted about it online. The footage of a police officer pointing a gun at a man who claimed to be an FBI director went viral. Social media exploded with opinions, speculation, and heated debates. Everyone seemed to have a take on what had happened, some praising the officer for following protocol, others criticizing him for not recognizing someone so important. At the police station, Daniel Hayes felt the pressure mounting. He had done everything by the book, yet the public response made him uneasy. His colleagues were divided. Some supported his actions, saying he couldn't be blamed for following safety procedures, while others wondered if he could have handled it differently. Daniel himself wasn't sure. He replayed the encounter in his mind repeatedly, analyzing every detail, wondering if there was a better way to handle it. Meanwhile, the FBI director was dealing with his own wave of consequences, though he had been released and was unharmed. The incident humiliated him. Being held at gunpoint by a local officer in a quiet suburban street was not something he had expected in his long career. He was known for enforcing law and order, but that night, he had experienced the vulnerability of being just another citizen. He found himself questioning how quickly things could escalate, how little recognition mattered when protocol took over. He spent hours speaking with his assistant and the FBI legal team, planning how to handle the media. Every news outlet wanted a comment. Every reporter wanted an exclusive. Some were sympathetic. Others sensationalized the story, emphasizing the tension and the potential danger. He wanted to be careful. One wrong word could make him appear arrogant, or worse, make the officer look incompetent. He knew he needed to handle this carefully to maintain trust in law enforcement. The officer, Daniel, faced a different kind of pressure. Internal Affairs had begun an inquiry, and he was asked to recount the events in detail. He explained everything, from the moment he noticed the vehicle behaving oddly to the point where he had to draw his weapon. His voice remained steady, but inside he felt conflicted. He had acted according to his training, yet he knew the world outside would judge differently. The incident was not just a misunderstanding anymore. It was now a test of accountability, public perception, and legal procedures. The FBI director requested a meeting with the police chief to discuss the incident. The meeting was tense. The chief acknowledged the officer's actions were in line with protocol, but admitted that the lack of immediate verification had led to unnecessary tension. They discussed procedures, training, and the importance of communication between agencies. The director stressed the need for improved identification systems so such misunderstandings wouldn't happen again. Public reaction remained intense. Social media posts, news articles, and online discussions debated every aspect of the encounter. Some criticized Daniel, saying he overreacted, pointing a gun at a man who was clearly non-threatening. Others defended him, noting that officers often deal with unknown situations where split-second decisions are life or death. The FBI director himself remained cautious in public statements, emphasizing that he understood the officer's position and that the situation could have been far worse if handled differently. The officer's colleagues offered support, reminding him that no one could predict how someone might act in high-pressure moments. Some shared similar experiences where misunderstandings led to dangerous outcomes. Daniel realized he wasn't alone in facing the weight of responsibility. He began to understand that while public opinion was important, his own reflection and adherence to protocol mattered most. At the same time, the director reflected on the human side of the encounter. He thought about the fear the officer must have felt, the training that compelled him to act cautiously. He realized that no matter how much power or authority someone had, the realities of law enforcement on the street could change the perspective. He felt empathy for Daniel, understanding that the officer was acting from a place of caution, not malice. The FBI director also faced questions from colleagues within the agency. Some were concerned about security risks and the potential embarrassment of such an event going public. Others viewed it as a reminder that even the most experienced officials could be vulnerable and that constant vigilance was necessary. The director had to balance his own feelings of indignation with the need to set an example of professionalism, humility, and restraint. Back at the police station, Daniel was asked to attend a series of interviews with internal investigators. They analyzed the video footage, body cam recordings, and witness statements. Every word he had said, every movement he had made, was scrutinized. The officer remained calm but anxious. He knew that the investigation would take time, and that public opinion could influence the outcome. He kept reminding himself that he had acted responsibly, but the thought of losing his job or facing serious charges weighed heavily on him. As the investigation continued, both men reflected on the unpredictability of the situation. The director realized how easily a routine day could spiral into a crisis. while Daniel understood the importance of staying calm and precise under pressure. They both learned that human error, protocol limitations, and chance encounters could collide in unexpected ways. Their lives were now intertwined by a moment that neither would forget. The media continued to follow the story closely. Some reporters interviewed witnesses who described the tense standoff, highlighting the bravery of both men. Others questioned the officer's judgment, wondering why he hadn't recognized the director or handled the situation differently. Online discussions became heated, with people debating the ethics, the procedures, and the human reactions involved. Both Daniel and the director tried to stay out of the public eye, focusing on their respective duties, yet the attention was unavoidable. In private, the director and Daniel briefly spoke. It was a short conversation, more about acknowledgement than explanation. The director thanked him for taking the situation seriously, while Daniel expressed relief that the misunderstanding had been resolved without injury. Both men understood that words couldn't fully capture the gravity of the event, but there was a mutual respect born from the experience. They shared a quiet understanding that the world didn't always see the human side of law enforcement. The incident sparked discussions within law enforcement circles. Officers debated how to handle similar situations in the future, while agencies considered improving identification verification procedures. Training programs were reviewed, emphasizing communication, caution, and situational awareness. The director offered suggestions, sharing his perspective on how high-ranking officials might be mistakenly treated in everyday scenarios. The goal was to prevent future misunderstandings and ensure safety for everyone involved. As days passed, life slowly returned to normal, but the memory of that night lingered. Daniel continued his patrols, more aware of the unpredictability of the job, more respectful of the pressures officers face in split-second decisions. The director returned to his work, carrying the lesson of humility and human vulnerability, aware that even those in power could find themselves in unexpected situations. Both men had gained insights that would shape their perspectives for years to come. The story of the encounter became a case study for law enforcement training, a vivid example of how misunderstandings, protocol, and human instinct could intersect. It was discussed in meetings, taught in classes, and shared among officers who wanted to learn from the experience. The narrative emphasized respect, empathy, and the careful balance between authority and caution. For Daniel and the director, it remained a personal lesson as well, a reminder that in the world of law enforcement, every moment counted, and every decision had weight far beyond what the eye could see. The weeks following the incident were some of the most intense both the officer and the director had ever experienced. The story had spread beyond the local area, picked up by national news outlets, and discussed on talk shows and podcasts. Everyone wanted to know exactly what had happened that night, why an FBI director had been held at gunpoint by a local officer, and what would happen next. For Daniel, life at the police station became complicated. Every colleague, supervisor, and even random people in the city wanted to talk about the incident. While he had done nothing wrong according to protocol, the constant attention wore on him. He spent long hours answering questions from internal affairs, reviewing body cam footage, and providing written reports. Each detail mattered. Every movement he had made was analyzed and questioned. The officer had always been confident in his abilities, but this situation tested his patience, resolve, and belief in the system he served. At home, Daniel found little solace. He replayed the night over and over in his mind, questioning whether there had been a better way to handle it. He had followed the rules, yet the weight of public scrutiny made him wonder if he had overreacted. The support from his family helped, but he still felt the pressure. The reality of the job, the unpredictable situations, and the consequences of split-second decisions weighed heavily on him. Even a single mistake could change everything, and the memory of pointing his weapon at anyone, left a lingering tension. The director, meanwhile, faced a very different type of challenge. His office was flooded with inquiries from media, federal officials, and colleagues. He was being questioned about security protocols, personal safety, and the possibility of similar incidents occurring in the future. Despite the embarrassment, he maintained his professionalism, understanding that his response would set an example for others in his position. He knew that any sign of anger or blame could escalate the situation further or create unnecessary controversy. Both men were under intense scrutiny, but the story began to shift as investigations progressed. Analysts reviewed the events, identifying the misunderstandings that led to the tense encounter. It became clear that Daniel had followed protocol exactly as trained, while the director had been in an unusual position, unrecognized, and vulnerable. Despite this, the human aspect remained at the center. Both men had acted with the best intentions, yet circumstances had escalated rapidly. During this time, discussions about law enforcement procedures intensified. Police departments across the country began reviewing how officers identify individuals, particularly high-ranking officials. The director offered input, emphasizing that training and communication could prevent such incidents without compromising officer safety. Daniel participated in discussions, sharing his perspective on following protocol and making decisions under pressure. Their experiences, though stressful, became valuable lessons for others. The tension escalated further when internal reviews suggested potential disciplinary actions against Daniel. Some officials argued that better judgment could have prevented the standoff, while others stressed that split-second decisions in the field were inherently risky. Daniel faced hearings, meetings, and interviews that tested his resolve. Each time he recounted the events, he felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that even minor details could affect his career and reputation. The director continued to manage public relations carefully. He provided statements emphasizing understanding, accountability, and the importance of protocol. He acknowledged the officer's position, recognizing the difficulty of handling unknown situations. By doing so, he maintained credibility while ensuring that the officer's actions were not unfairly judged. His approach helped calm public opinion, highlighting the human side of law enforcement rather than sensationalizing the incident. Despite the official and public attention, both men had moments of personal reflection. Daniel considered the fragility of human perception, how easily assumptions could escalate into dangerous situations, and how vital communication was. He understood that training, while essential, could only go so far in preparing for real-life unpredictability. Every day on the street carried the possibility of an unexpected encounter, a situation where instincts and judgment could determine the outcome. The director also reflected on vulnerability and humility. For someone in his position, accustomed to authority and recognition, being treated like any other person was a profound reminder of equality under the law. He felt empathy for officers who faced difficult decisions every day, aware that their actions often went unseen or misunderstood. The incident deepened his understanding of the challenges faced by law enforcement, bridging a gap between federal leadership and officers on the ground. As the investigation progressed, media coverage continued but shifted focus. Experts analyzed the procedures, offering insights into best practices for law enforcement. Discussions emerged about the balance between caution and recognition, the need for real-time verification, and the importance of maintaining professionalism under pressure. Daniel and the director, while still central figures, became examples in these discussions, their experiences illustrating broader lessons applicable to many. The community also responded. Local residents who had witnessed the event expressed mixed emotions, some gratitude that the officer acted responsibly, some concern about the level of force used. Conversations in neighborhoods, workplaces, and schools reflected a broader interest in understanding law enforcement challenges. The director and Daniel became symbols not of blame or conflict, but of the complexity of human judgment and procedural responsibilities. Behind closed doors, both men had private conversations with colleagues and mentors. Daniel sought guidance on handling public scrutiny, maintaining composure, and learning from the incident. The director focused on strategic communication, ensuring that the event did not undermine public trust or create unnecessary tension between agencies. Both found reassurance in mutual understanding. The situation, while unusual and stressful, was a learning opportunity rather than a permanent failure. Months into the aftermath, changes began to take shape. Police departments implemented improved identification protocols, officers received updated training on handling unknown individuals, and interagency communication channels were strengthened. Daniel and the director contributed to these initiatives, sharing first-hand experiences to guide policy and practice. Their collaboration demonstrated that even tense, difficult encounters could result in constructive outcomes. The personal impact remained profound. Daniel gained a deeper appreciation for the unpredictability of his work and the weight of every decision he made. He recognized the importance of empathy, understanding that the people he encountered were often acting in good faith, but under extraordinary circumstances. The director, on the other hand, embraced humility and patience, aware that authority did not shield him from the realities of the world. Both men had grown through the ordeal, their perspectives shaped by an event neither could have anticipated. As life gradually returned to routine, the story remained a reference point. Daniel continued his patrols, now with increased confidence and insight. The director returned to his work, navigating federal responsibilities with a renewed awareness of the human side of enforcement. Their shared experience, marked by tension, uncertainty, and eventual understanding, became a testament to the complexity of law enforcement, the importance of protocol, and the enduring lessons of human interaction under pressure. In quiet moments, both men remembered the night differently. Daniel thought about the fear, the adrenaline, and the responsibility he had felt, while the director reflected on vulnerability, respect, and the unpredictable nature of life. Together, their story illustrated the delicate balance between authority and caution, a narrative that was not only about a standoff but about humanity, judgment, and the power of understanding. The following weeks were a time of intense reflection and investigation. Both Daniel and the director were under continuous scrutiny, and the weight of public and professional attention shaped every decision they made. The incident had revealed vulnerabilities, misunderstandings, and the unpredictable nature of life in law enforcement and leadership. Daniel continued his daily patrols, but every encounter carried a heightened awareness. He was more cautious, more observant, and more reflective about how his actions might be perceived. He paid attention to small details, the way people moved, the tone of their voices, and even the subtle signs of nervousness or uncertainty. His training had always emphasized awareness, but the experience with the director reinforced the importance of empathy and understanding the human side of every interaction. Meanwhile, the director had returned to his work, yet the incident lingered in his mind. He had never anticipated being put in a situation where his authority and identity were unrecognized. It was a humbling experience, and he carried it with him as a reminder of the fragility of perception. He reflected on how easily misunderstanding could escalate, and how critical communication and patience were in moments of tension. The investigation into the event continued in parallel. Internal affairs, federal officials, and legal teams reviewed every aspect of the encounter. They examined body cam footage, witness statements, and procedural records. Each detail was important: Daniel's decisions, the director's reactions, and the environment in which the incident occurred. The goal was not to assign blame, but to understand what had happened and how future situations could be handled more effectively. During this period, the officer faced multiple interviews and hearings. He recounted the night's events with precision, explaining his observations, the actions he had taken, and the reasoning behind them. Each question brought back memories of the tension, the fear, and the adrenaline. Daniel understood that his actions had been necessary to maintain safety, yet the weight of the situation was heavy. He began to appreciate the complexity of the role he had chosen, realizing that every decision could have profound consequences. The director also spent time reflecting on the responsibilities of those in positions of authority. He recognized that protocols were in place to protect everyone, including himself, but he also saw the potential for misunderstanding when systems were not perfectly aligned. He spoke with colleagues and other law enforcement leaders about how high-ranking officials could be mistakenly treated, emphasizing the need for mutual respect, communication, and clear identification processes. As news outlets continued to report on the story, public reaction evolved. The narrative shifted from shock and sensationalism to discussion and learning. Experts analyzed the incident, highlighting lessons about protocol, human behavior, and communication. Daniel's adherence to procedure was praised, and the director's handling of the aftermath became an example of professionalism and humility. The situation, while tense, had transformed into a teaching moment for law enforcement agencies and the public alike. In private conversations, both men reflected on the human side of the encounter. Daniel thought about fear and perception, the rapid decisions he had made, and the responsibility that came with carrying a firearm. He understood that his training had guided him, but instinct had also played a crucial role. The director considered vulnerability and authority, the way assumptions could lead to conflict, and how patience and empathy could de-escalate tense situations. Both men had gained insights that were difficult to quantify, but invaluable in shaping their perspectives. As the investigation continued, policies and procedures were reviewed. Police departments examined identification methods, communication protocols, and training programs. Recommendations were made to ensure that officers could verify identities quickly and accurately while maintaining safety. Daniel contributed his perspective, emphasizing the importance of balance between caution and understanding. The director offered guidance on how federal officials could support local law enforcement without creating confusion or risk. The emotional impact on both men remained significant. Daniel struggled with anxiety, replaying the night over and over in his mind, analyzing each choice and every reaction. He sought support from colleagues and mentors, discussing strategies for managing stress, improving decision-making, and maintaining confidence. The director also experienced lingering emotions, a mix of humility, frustration, and reflection. He recognized the unpredictability of life and the need to approach every situation with care and awareness. Their shared experience created a subtle bond, a quiet understanding that transcended rank and authority. Both men had been tested in ways they had not anticipated, and both had emerged with a deeper appreciation for the challenges of their respective roles. The incident reminded them that human judgment, empathy, and communication were as important as training and procedure. In community forums and professional meetings, the story was discussed as an example of human error, misunderstanding, and resolution. Officers shared lessons learned, exploring ways to improve training and response. Federal officials examined policies, considering how to support local law enforcement and prevent similar situations. The narrative became a teaching tool, highlighting the complexity of real-life situations and the importance of measured, thoughtful actions. Despite the pressure, life gradually returned to a sense of normalcy. Daniel continued his duties, patrols, and investigations, now with a heightened sense of awareness and caution. He approached each interaction with more empathy, understanding that even minor misunderstandings could escalate rapidly. The director resumed his work with renewed perspective, mindful of the human element in every encounter and the importance of clear communication and patience. Both men occasionally reflected privately on the night that changed so much. Daniel thought about fear, responsibility, and the importance of staying calm under pressure. The director considered authority, humility, and the vulnerability inherent in human life. Together, their experiences formed a story of tension, learning, and personal growth, a story that would continue to influence their perspectives for years to come. As time passed, their experiences were incorporated into training programs, public discussions, and professional development seminars. The incident became a reference for understanding the intersection of human behavior, law enforcement protocol, and leadership. Lessons were drawn, policies were adjusted, and awareness was increased. Daniel and the director had inadvertently contributed to a broader understanding of the challenges faced by those in positions of authority and responsibility. The resolution of the situation did not erase the memory of that night. It remained vivid in both men's minds, a constant reminder of the delicate balance between caution, authority, and human perception. The experience shaped their actions, decisions, and interactions moving forward. It taught them that every encounter carried weight. Every choice had consequences, and that understanding, empathy, and patience were essential components of professional and personal growth. In the end, the story was not just about a gun pointed at an unsuspecting man or an officer following protocol. It was about humanity, judgment, and the lessons learned when two people from very different positions found themselves caught in a moment that tested their instincts, their principles, and their understanding of one another. It was a story that would continue to resonate, reminding everyone involved of the unpredictability of life and the importance of compassion, communication, and awareness. The final weeks of the investigation brought closure, though the impact of that night lingered with both Daniel and the director. By now, all internal reviews had been completed, and findings were presented to the appropriate authorities. It was determined that Daniel had acted entirely within protocol, and while the situation was tense and unusual, there was no fault in the officer's actions. The director's identity had been verified, and the chain of events had been examined thoroughly. Though relieved, both men knew that the experience would remain a defining moment in their lives. Daniel was formally cleared, and a commendation was quietly noted in his record for his professionalism under pressure. Despite the public scrutiny and internal questioning, he had maintained composure and followed procedures exactly as trained. The acknowledgement gave him a sense of relief, but the lessons learned were more profound than any official recognition could capture. He had been reminded of the unpredictability of life on the streets, the importance of careful observation, and the human element present in every interaction. The director, on the other hand, felt a mixture of relief and humility. He had survived a situation that could have gone wrong in countless ways, and he had emerged with insights into the realities of life outside the controlled environments of federal leadership. The incident reinforced the importance of patience, clear communication, and empathy in all aspects of life. Though he continued to lead with authority, he carried with him a newfound understanding of vulnerability and respect for those enforcing the law at the local level. The media slowly moved on to other stories, but the lessons from the event were incorporated into training and educational programs. Police officers were taught to anticipate misunderstandings and to verify information carefully while maintaining professionalism and calm. Federal agencies discussed identification protocols and interdepartmental communication, emphasizing collaboration rather than confrontation. Daniel and the director had inadvertently contributed to meaningful improvements in safety and awareness, their experience becoming a valuable tool for education. For Daniel, the aftermath also brought personal reflection. He spent quiet evenings thinking about the sequence of events, the tension, and the responsibility he had carried. He considered how fear and instinct had influenced his decisions, how training guided his actions, and how human judgment played a crucial role in maintaining safety. The experience deepened his empathy for those he interacted with, reminding him that everyone, regardless of position, was capable of fear, misunderstanding, and error. The director reflected on the night in a similar manner. He thought about vulnerability, humility, and the unpredictability of everyday life. Even someone with power and authority could find themselves in circumstances that demanded patience, restraint, and careful communication. He considered the courage and diligence of law enforcement officers, the difficult decisions they make, and the responsibility they carry. His respect for those on the front lines grew, and he approached leadership with renewed appreciation for human limitations and the complexity of real-world interactions. In the community, conversations about the incident shifted from shock to reflection. Residents who had witnessed or heard about the event considered the human side of law enforcement, the unpredictability of life, and the lessons learned from careful protocol and professional restraint. Schools and local organizations even discussed the story as an example of responsibility, empathy, and the importance of understanding different perspectives. The event, once a source of tension, became a case study in awareness, professionalism, and human interaction. Daniel and the director eventually met one more time in a quiet, private setting. There were no cameras, no reporters, and no pressure. They exchanged a simple acknowledgement, a shared understanding that the incident had been a moment of learning for both. Daniel expressed respect for the director's patience and professionalism, while the director thanked Daniel for handling the situation with integrity and care. The brief meeting solidified a quiet bond, rooted in shared experience and mutual respect. Life gradually returned to routine. Daniel continued his patrols, more confident yet more mindful than before. He approached every encounter with a sense of measured awareness, balancing caution with empathy. He carried the memory of that night as a reminder that human judgment, careful observation, and clear communication were essential, and that even small decisions could have profound consequences. His career was strengthened not by recognition alone, but by the lessons he had absorbed and the maturity he had gained. The director also moved forward, overseeing investigations, managing teams, and guiding federal operations with the added perspective of personal vulnerability. He remained vigilant, aware that authority did not protect against unforeseen situations, But he also approached his role with greater empathy for those executing decisions under pressure. His experience became a personal guide, reminding him that leadership required understanding, patience, and respect for the human element in all interactions. The story of that night, while no longer dominating headlines, continued to resonate in training rooms, professional discussions, and personal reflection. It served as a vivid example of how quickly misunderstandings can escalate, how important it is to follow protocol, and how crucial it is to balance authority with empathy. Daniel and the director, through their shared experience, had shaped not only their own perspectives but also the practices and policies of those around them. Months later, Daniel walked the same streets where the incident had occurred. Nothing was different in appearance, but his perception had shifted. He saw the people, the cars, the quiet homes with a deeper awareness of the unpredictability and fragility of everyday life. Every encounter, no matter how routine, carried the potential for misunderstanding, and every decision had weight. He moved with careful observation, confidence, and a sense of responsibility that had been deepened by experience. The director also reflected privately. He thought about the delicate balance of authority, vulnerability, and human connection. The incident had humbled him, taught him empathy, and reinforced the importance of communication. He approached his work with renewed clarity, aware that leadership was not just about power, but about understanding the people and circumstances he guided. The experience became part of his identity, a constant reminder of the human side of every decision. In the end, the night that had begun with tension, fear, and misunderstanding became a story of growth, insight, and humanity. Daniel and the director had both faced challenges, navigated uncertainty, and emerged with lessons that would shape them forever. The world saw only the headline, the dramatic standoff, but those involved understood the deeper meaning, the importance of patience, empathy, professionalism, and the recognition that every person, every action, and every decision carries consequences beyond what can be immediately seen. The incident became more than a story. It became a testament to human resilience, understanding, and the potential for growth through challenge. Daniel carried it as a guide for every encounter, every decision, and every interaction. The director carried it as a reminder of humility, empathy, and the need for clear communication. Together, their experiences became a quiet, enduring lesson for anyone who works in law enforcement, leadership, or any field where human judgment and responsibility intersect. The standoff on that quiet suburban street had ended, but the lessons it provided would last a lifetime.